last weekend's storm brought double-digit snows to many areas north of Interstate 80, from Meadville and Edinburgh to Wellsboro and Towanda. But none of the primary observing sites in the state got 10 inches or more of snow from that storm. And in fact, away from Lake Erie, double-digit snowstorms aren't that common in Pennsylvania. Here's the total number of 10-inch plus storms at 5 major observing sites in the state from 1896 to 2018. That's 123 years of data. It's probably easier to digest these numbers if I convert to the average number per decade. So in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, a 10-inch plus snowstorm occurs about 3 times every 10 years on average, about 5 times per decade in Harrisburg and Williamsport, and about 7 times every 10 years in State College. As for how these big snowstorms are distributed over the winter, here's a breakdown for Pittsburgh. I split every month in half to give better resolution. Now, you could argue that at least historically, the latter half of December to the first half of March has about equal chance in the Steel City. Now, in State College, certainly an uptick in the first half of January, but February and especially the first half of March really stand out. In fact, March has more big snowstorms than February in State College. If we head southeast of the mountains to Harrisburg, the historical pattern is pretty flat from the latter half of January to the first half of March. Almost 3/4 of all big snows in Harrisburg occurred during that 2-month period. Finally, on the coastal plain in Philadelphia, the concentration is very much late January and February. Early March tends to be too warm for big snowstorms. And now comes the interactive part. Guess how many times a snowstorm has dumped 10 inches or more at all 5 of these locations. Remember, we have data back to 1896. What do you think? Well, it's actually only happened 5 times. That's how diverse the climate of our state is. Now, the first was a little-known storm in 1947 that barely got to 10 inches at 3 of these sites. Another was a storm in February 1961 that maxed out in north-central Pennsylvania. For example, Coudersport got 22 inches. And this winter of 60-61 is the only one on record when Philadelphia had 3 10-inch snowstorms. You might remember the third storm in January 1978 in the middle of the second straight brutally cold winter in the East. Next is the March 93 superstorm. About half the state got 20 inches or more. This is still the second biggest snowstorm on record in State College and third biggest in Pittsburgh. And finally, and most recently, the President's Day storm of February 2003, the 7th biggest snowstorm on record in both Philadelphia and Harrisburg. Interestingly, none of the 5 snowstorms I just mentioned was the biggest snow producer at any of the cities we looked at. For example, Philadelphia's biggest storm on record was the blizzard of January 1996. Harrisburg's was fairly recent, January 2016, and Pittsburgh's was an odd late November storm way back in 1950. Stay tuned. We'll see if there are any snowstorms in our extended forecast next.